Nambo on Power 98.7.
It's 18:34 on Power Business. Move on now to a conversation with South Africa's engineers, the consulting engineers of South Africa. And this is on the back of the public procurement bill. We know that's sitting with the National Council of Provinces at present. And the move there, of course, is the possibility there is that it will move ahead, passed by Parliament, signed by the President, and will be enacted. But it looks like there's a huge pushback. And the consulting engineers of South Africa are joining us this evening to speak to us about why they are quite unhappy with some of the provisions that currently sit within that piece of legislation. Chris Campbell is the CEO of the organization, and he is on the line right now. Chris, hello. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners.
Fantastic.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for chatting to us this evening, Chris. It's an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Let's speak about this piece of legislation. Maybe starting off with, from your perspective as an organization, what government's intention was when they put this piece of legislation together.
So I think firstly, the objective behind putting this piece of legislation together was to try to bring together legislation that's sitting in different pockets in the Municipal Finance Management Act, in the Public Finance Management Act, in various regulation, the old preferential procurement regulations, and to try and consolidate it into one, which would then be applicable on a national basis. So that is the objective, which we have understood, and we don't think that's a bad idea either. Except you've got to get it right. It's not something that you can just cut and paste and hope that everything fits together. It's going to work.
So let's talk. Yes.
There are too many moving parts, especially since we're a constitutional democracy. Local government has got an element and a form of autonomy. And likewise, provincial and national government. So, this bill doesn't take sufficient cognizance of that.
So let's talk about, some of the exact issues, Chris, that arise for the consulting engineers of South Africa here. What are you most concerned about as you take, a look at this piece of legislation?
Okay, so I think, firstly, if one understands and supports the objectives behind this, then you would hope that we're going to make progress and then get on the path of being able to implement it, because as a country, for too long, and I can specifically talk on the infrastructure area, we've compromised value for money and often ended up with least cost decisions with taking into the total cost of ownership. And the unfortunate thing with the legislation as it currently stands, there are way too many pitfalls that may find us, and most likely find us, running aground even after it's been signed off by the President, which it's not unusual. There's, for example, a Khoisan Leadership Act of 2019, which the Constitutional Court had found was not legal simply because National Treasury had not factored in all of the public consultation that they had received. Now, this bill has on record a similar situation through Parliament in the phase just before the National Council of Provinces. So there's a pitfall. In the Chapter 4, Preferential Procurement, much as we need to have transformative legislation, yet again, in this bill, it's very far from qualifying to be considered a framework. It's too prescriptive. So we run the risk, yet again, of a constitutional court challenge, which caused the previous preferential procurement regulations to be ruled as being unconstitutional. So we're not going to make much progress at a time when we need to.
I'm getting Chris to also speak about the, consultation here. Of course, this is an important step in lots of the legislations passed here in South Africa.
Yes.
Has it been adequate? Have you been engaged, and could you have been engaged more?
So if I talk about, let's just talk the infrastructure world and because that's the area that we have offer the most services through our members, infrastructure development and the construction industry broadly. Now, in the bill itself, what was of major concern to us was infrastructure is a major spend in our country. It constitutes a large investment, and in a country that's fast running out of money, we need to find ways and the best way of using and getting value for money out of those processes. In fact, just to give you a sense of reality, in 2022, if we take our GDP as a country of 4.5 trillion, then the spend on infrastructure assets, which generally over a 16.6, over a 20-year average, was 750 billion. Now, that's only 16.6. We should be at 30%. But the problem with that is that even the processes, and this bill doesn't take cognizance of the importance of procurement. There's very little substance in the bill on how we in principle can we derive better value for money in all of our procurement spend, and also move us away from treating all procurement as the same. Because if you're buying ballpoint pens, there's one process for that, and that's simple. You can write with it for 5 minutes, it don't cost you 5 rand. But when you're building roads for communities, or you're building houses, or you're putting in water installations, that's meant to last for 30 years. So your procurement decisions and processes must factor in all of that. If on the contrary, you find that the process is fragmented, and you definitely run the risk of not having the infrastructure that's meant to last for the 30 years of its lifetime.
I'm also keen, I think, to find out about, where we are in terms of this legislation and what might be the result of it being passed. And I'm going to make an example maybe of the NHI, where we've spoken here on the show to many people who are in the healthcare sector, and they've made it perfectly clear that should the legislation be passed, it will be highly litigated, which means that we might never even see any of it come to fruition. Chris, is this a possibility with this piece of legislation?
Look, it's highly likely, and this is not even... this is not a singular opinion from my organization. Multiple parties have interrogated this with even better legal and looking at the legal substance, and the likelihood is very great. And of course, I think the tragedy that we have here is that whereas we need to be spending more money and getting value for money through our infrastructure to grow our economy, but we're not going to make, the steps in the right direction so that we can exactly realize the value of the investment that we have made.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening, Chris. I hope we'll be in touch with you as we watch the whole process unfold. Like we said, it's one of those situations where we all agree on where we need to go, but we're not quite agreeing on how to get there, like many other pieces of legislation that we're seeing come out during this period.
Yeah, no, I think that maybe without going into the substance of the detail, I think we just need to think of where we are at. We're running into elections, and we leave it there, and we all understand why it is being pushed so quickly.
Absolutely agree with you there, Chris. Thank you for speaking to us this evening, and we'll certainly be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Oh, wow. That's Chris Campbell. He's a CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa, speaking to us on that issue of the public procurement bill. It is one, I'm saying, like the NHI, right? We all agree on where we're trying to go here. We all agree on universal healthcare. We all agree we need infrastructure. But for some reason, we're just not quite, meeting the same strategy in terms of how to get there, which is very, very interesting because all of this just leads to nothing happening and more delays. The issue there is that, we are a democracy that prides itself on being consultative in nature. And, recently the Anglo-American CEO, Duncan Wanblad, said South Africa's democracy is very loud and not very productive. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he was saying. And it just makes me wonder if this is one of those moments also, or when we're trying to put legislation together, we get to a place where we have lots and lots of conversations, we slow down the process, but most importantly, we don't get to where we're trying to go.